And the web in particular is presenting some quite extraordinary wider challenges. I can only gloss these here, and again, these are relatively commonplace, but it's sometimes worth pointing out. On the negative side, of course, the web is indiscriminate in its principles of inclusion. Anything can get onto it, the bad and the good. It also, because it's so easy to use, it can substitute quite superficial surface for depth, copying and imitation in place of originality, and it is passion for recycling, I think, is interesting but a great danger to us. Recycling ideas and content. Thinking habits change quite dramatically. We're now getting more and more used, particularly those who teach, I think. Students often, if they can't quickly get into something, and often literally find it on Google, their interest passes on. The very nature of the depth of the dialogue we're going into is changing. And that may be negative, but on the positive, information is not the same as knowledge, and there's no question, of course, that the wide access to raw information provided by the internet is quite unparalleled, and I think very democratizing. If we lose something by not reading in depth on one subject, maybe we gain by being able to link together many ideas from many subjects, and I think it's very characteristic of the moving image that people do borrow across art forms, creating that notion of creative industry. We've probably, as individuals and societies, only just begun to explore and scrape the surface of these, but they're fascinating opportunities and challenges, and also both to artists and to cultural organisations. I'd like to just very quickly look at a couple of institutions and how they're responding to some of this on their websites. So this is the Whitney that has created Your Collection, and again, very few of these, I mean, they're quite commonly out there, but the Whitney is one of the earliest and best, where they're allowing you to create your own online galleries or collections of work. So again, the notion of saying, we may curate in our galleries, but here is our work, you can make what you will of it. And of course, where that work is borrowed and goes, increasingly we're losing control, but we're also having work going out from our institutions, packaged up by other people, from people who are expert themselves to others who are not. And I think that's really quite interesting, looking at, as we're giving away some access to some of this information, we're also giving it away to the world who might be experiencing our works in a very different context from the control we normally have on that work. The Louvre, creating virtual exhibitions, so I think these are ones they've created themselves, but using 3D technologies to create mini exhibitions you can go into, and the fascinating thing there is if the gallery is busy, you can go and spend more time remembering it and examining it, exploring it online. The Guggenheim recently produced this using YouTube play, and it's about contemporary online media arts, and it's a competition where basically people from around the world can contribute and enter. This is, I think, the entries have literally just closed, so this is very contemporary. And again, in some senses you could say, is this relatively superficial, putting out a call for web-based pieces? But actually, if you really think of the Guggenheim seeing this as a serious way by which they will in future curate and present the international world of the moving image, it is quite a profound change, and I don't think these will go away. I think we'll find these developing in greater sophistication. And again, you see this is where you're starting to get pieces here that will be virtually industrial based, animations of all kind. You're moving this outside the realm of the specific art practice and butting art practice up against other forms of practice, which I think again is going to change things significantly. One of the oldest of all, many of you will know Ars Electronica, really from the whole electronic and time-based arts movement. It's probably the godfather of the cyber arts institutions, with the Pre-Art Electronica being one of the prime international art prizes. The centre itself has been changing over the past years, but one of the things I think it did was really take a quite broad spread approach to media art. And again, you have works in here, while the centre of their interest may be art, you have works that are biologically interested, advertising, animation. I think they've set one of the tones of the moving image as an area where moving across from art practice into other disciplines is quite accepted and common. That's a survey of the field, and it touches on it lightly, no more than that, but I hope for those of you who are less familiar with the field that I've been able to give a bit of a sense of where this has come from, the variety of approaches underway, and the types of artists and practitioners, and also something about a very light touch on the way some of the major international galleries are starting to respond to this. In the second half of what I want to talk about, I'd like to move over to my own institution, ACME, and talk about that in a little bit of depth. Because among those institutions that sought to take a broader perspective on the field of the moving image as a whole, more than just art practice, and we see this as I hope I've already demonstrated, quite a diverse but coherent field of popular culture, based in the notion of screen theory and practice, which I don't have time to open up here, but there is a very substantial body of thinking and critical discussion now underpinning this, and seeing screen-based practice as something in its own right. We opened in late 2002. Just to give you, I'm sorry, I missed one other, the Yamaguchi Centre, some of you may know, a venue looking at performance and media, so integrating media into performance here. So this is ACME. You've seen this already. We're part of Federation Square in the centre of Melbourne. This is a very large outdoor space with the big screen at this end here. So it's used for all sorts of community festivals, music performances, sporting events broadcast on the large screen, artistic works broadcast on the large screen. And ACME is the building at the rear here. We opened in 2002. And really, our aim was to become one of Australia's major cultural and learning destinations, and learning is very important to us, with a very simple aim in one sense, which is to collect, explore and exhibit, both on-site and online, the full cultural and creative richness of the moving image in all its forms, media, art, film, television, video games, and all aspects of digital culture. We have a very vibrant annual calendar of exhibitions, film programmes, festivals, live events, talks and forums, creative workshops and education programmes, as well as a significant collection. And we deliver to a very broad diversity of audiences, but one of the things we find is disproportionate a young audience, by which I mean the sort of 18 to 35 age range, who seem to find this hybrid and mixed media approach to the moving image very natural. We often find people who are somewhat older than that feel that find it difficult to see why we're putting art practice alongside industry practice. We find younger age ranges rarely bother about this. They're very happy with that notion. Just to give you a very quick sense of what we've become now, this is the centre of our building. There's a large atrium with a whole series of galleries and auditorium off it. Since we opened in 2002, our annual visitation has reached 750,000 last year and is now growing rapidly towards 1 million next year. Like many Western institutions, we have a free entry, but for many of our exhibitions and film programmes are charged for, so probably 2/3 of our audiences actually pay an entry fee. We're about 10 to 12,000 square metres of public space and multiple state-of-the-art facilities for the general public, students, researchers and professional creatives and artists themselves, where we can engage in residencies. And as I've already talked about, the way we like to try and employ practising artists in appropriate creative areas to bring that practice right into ACME. We're about a 28 million Australian dollar turnover. We have a very strong core curatorial and creative teams. People from television, people from art backgrounds, people from technology backgrounds, and I don't think we could do what we do without that. One of the things we found is our technology department, which is often put over as a sort of resource, we've put them right in the creative team, because very little moving image work is now put together without a creative and a technological team coming together. So we've built our technologists right into the heart of the way we present what we do. If I just look very briefly, I'm a great believer in, if you can put on one piece of paper what your institution is about, you've probably got something right. I joined ACME in beginning of 2005, when it had got off to a slightly slow start, really with only our major galleries and cinemas opened. And I was asked to develop a model for this, because I think there wasn't clarity on what we were doing. Just very briefly on this, but it'll give you a sense of our perspective on why we bring what we do together. I've already talked about screen culture. We did define ourselves, and we said very strongly we would be about more than just art practice. The way we do it, exploration of the subject, engagement I've talked about a lot. We want the makers to be in there working with us. We want industry to be in there, and we want the public to be engaging with the artists themselves. And finally, the one that's probably less usual, if you accept what I've said so far, we have to be about helping people to become creators in their own right, because they want that, and also because in becoming creators, I think they understand the nature of the moving image better. If we're going to do that, I often say we're a slightly hybrid institution. If you look down here, we have these 5 main strands and online. So the first thing we said is, we're going to have to tell people why we're covering the moving image in the round. And really we have a permanent gallery, and I'll show you this briefly, which is there. It'll be there for about 10 years. It'll change slowly. It's free entry, and it tells the story of the moving image from the birth of cinema in 1895 or so to the contemporary day, and explores these aspects of film, animation, television, as well as media art. Very broad general audience, and this only opened in late 2009 and is proving very successful. It almost becomes the linchpin around, once we've told people why we've brought this material together, then the other offers work around it. The second area, if that's a sort of mini history, we want to be about ideas and innovation and art. So our special exhibitions program I'll show you. This again ranges very broadly. Some exhibitions are of very broad interest, some are much more difficult, challenging, artistic shows, and over a period we cover a variety of topics. If we're going to be about film, it may be increasingly that we show film by digital means, but seeing it in a cinema auditorium is still very important. So the notion almost of a cultural or art house film centre was something we wanted to build in from the word go. If we're going to be about creation, we'd have to have production studios, and I'll show you some of those. And it's very, very important, because not only does it get young learners and education audiences engaged, but we're finding people who are inspired to start their artistic careers through these. And again, it's forced us to have a quite significant studio production team, as well as educators, to help people. And finally, because I mentioned we have a significant collection, a resource centre is very important to us, and that ranges from community memories, people just interested in that, right through to researchers and collectors, filmmakers, and so on. And of course, in this day and age, the best of online and mobile, which is almost taking that out to the wider world. So the notion brings together very simply a sort of hybrid, part museum, part art gallery, part film centre, part production studio, and part resource centre. And I do see it that way. We do actually work, our partnerships do range across those sort of internationally, partners from the big galleries like the Museum of Modern Art to industry practitioners, quite strongly. If you'd ask, ultimately, if you're still not convinced on this cross-disciplinary approach moving outside the art boundaries, I would simply say, why not in the end? The fine and decorative arts have often been put together in history. MoMA itself in New York, of course, was set up to do not just art practice, but film, design, architecture. And I think increasingly this notion of hybrid practice is quite acceptable to the audiences.